Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today, we will be diving into the important and complex topics of prejudice and racism. We'll explore what these terms really mean, how they differ, and the significant effects they have on our society. I'm looking forward to unpacking these ideas with you and fostering a deeper understanding together. Let's get started. Prejudice is essentially a preconceived opinion or feeling, usually negative, directed toward a person or group based on certain perceived traits like race, ethnicity, gender, or religion. It's important to understand that prejudice is more about attitude or belief, often formed without enough knowledge or direct experience. Because it's based on assumptions rather than facts, this biased stance can result in unfair judgments and discriminatory behavior. The key point here is that prejudice arises from how we perceive others' characteristics, which can unfairly influence our thoughts and actions toward them. Racism is fundamentally the belief that different races have inherent traits or abilities that make it acceptable to discriminate against or dominate some races over others. It's important to understand that racism is more than just individual bias or prejudice. While prejudice involves personal attitudes or feelings, racism is tied to larger systems of power. This means it's embedded in institutions and social structures that maintain unequal treatment and oppression based on race. Essentially, racism functions within our social, political, and economic systems to create and uphold racial hierarchies, ensuring that some groups remain privileged while others face exclusion or disadvantage. This distinction is crucial for grasping how racism persists beyond just personal beliefs to influence broader societal dynamics. When we compare prejudice and racism, it's important to understand their fundamental differences. Prejudice is primarily an individual attitude or feeling. It's about personal bias someone might hold against a group. Racism, however, goes deeper. It's a belief system that's built into societal power structures, meaning it's supported and reinforced by institutions and systems. Another key point is how these two operate on different levels. Prejudice can exist without any connection to systemic power, but racism needs that institutional backing to maintain its influence. This leads us to the impact and scope. Prejudice mainly affects personal interactions and individual perspectives. On the other hand, racism involves group dynamics and plays a significant role in maintaining societal control. Because racism is embedded in systems and institutions, its effects are much broader and more damaging. It creates widespread social inequalities that go beyond just personal bias. So, while both prejudice and racism are harmful, racism has a much larger and more severe impact on society as a whole. Here, we can see clear examples of both prejudice and racism. First, take the example of assuming someone is unfriendly just because of their cultural background. This is prejudice. It's about the attitudes or feelings we hold toward others based on preconceived notions, often without any real interaction. Another example of prejudice is feeling distrust toward a group simply because of stereotypes, which unfairly generalizes people without understanding them as individuals. On the other hand, racism goes beyond personal attitudes and shows up in systems and structures. For instance, discriminatory laws and policies that prevent certain racial groups from voting or accessing education are clear examples of racism. They create real barriers that limit opportunities. Similarly, segregation practices, which enforce racial separation in schools or neighborhoods, reveal how racism operates to maintain inequality on a larger scale. These examples highlight the difference between prejudice as individual bias and racism as systemic injustice. It's crucial to recognize both to understand how they affect people's lives. When we talk about prejudice, we're referring to a personal biased attitude that someone holds, but usually doesn't have the backing of larger systems or institutions. Racism, on the other hand, is much more than just individual feelings. It's about systemic power that enforces discrimination based on race across society. This means that while prejudice can exist on its own, racism takes it a step further by embedding harm into social and institutional structures, making its impact much more widespread and damaging. Recognizing these differences is crucial because it helps us tackle both the individual biases people might hold and the broader systemic inequalities that need to be changed. Understanding this distinction is key to making meaningful progress.